Hey friends, it's Matt Weaver here with Bible Truth Project, and today we have Aaron Lipkin with us again, and we're going to be discussing something that he has given different lectures, and I heard about it first through a YouTube video, and it's about the covenants. Actually, three different covenants, and a lot of times in the Christian world, especially, we're kind of unfamiliar that there really was three covenants that God made with Israel during the Exodus, the first one being Sinai, the next being in Moab, and the next at Ebal or Eval. So I am intrigued. So thank you again, Aaron, for agreeing to do this and for teaching us. So thank you so much.
Thank you for having me, Matthew.
So jump right into it.
Okay, I think that we first need to start with a simple question. Is the Bible a history book? And, all my life I've been fighting scholars that say that the Bible is not a history book, that the majority of the stories from Genesis to Samuel are a fairy tale, or stories that were written in a much later period by people who didn't really think about describing real historical events. They just wanted to, strengthen the kingdom of Judah or the Judean kings, whatever. For me to hear someone saying the Bible is not a history book is something that bothers me. But now I'm saying it. I'm saying that the Bible is not a history book. It doesn't mean that the events described in the Bible are not historical. They are. But what do I mean when I say that the Bible is not a history book? And, I'll give you an example. King Josiah goes out to fight against a Pharaoh Necho. And the Bible describes how Josiah gets wounded and killed in the battle fighting the Egyptian Pharaoh. But the Bible doesn't give any more description about this battle. Why did it happen? Why did Pharaoh come into Canaan? Why did Josiah go out to stop him? What was going on? Now, we know from Egyptian inscriptions that the reason why Pharaoh went into Canaan is actually not to fight King Josiah, but rather to participate in what is probably a world war, a war against Babylon. Pharaoh wanted to join Assyria in fighting against Babylon. This is a world war in the time. But the Bible is not saying anything about that. The Bible is not describing the context of the death of Josiah. Now, why is that? It's because it's not relevant for the biblical story. The importance of the world war is not important to the lineage of the kingdom of Judah, and therefore it's not worth mentioning. A history book that is describing the time would have to describe the context. A history book would probably give a very detailed explanation of the reasons why Pharaoh went into the land of Israel. Where was Josiah exactly in that world war system? Did he side with Babylon? Did he side with the Assyrians? Obviously, if he fought against Pharaoh Necho, he was with the Babylonians. So all of that would have been described in a history book of the time. But we don't have a history book like that. All we have is the Egyptian inscriptions describing that war from the Egyptian side. So, in other words, we understand that the Bible is not a history book. It doesn't give a full description of all the historical events at a certain point. Just if we jump to modern history, a book describing the Battle of Midway without describing anything or mentioning World War II is not a real history book. I mean, you have to have the context. You have to have all the information, everything, what's going on in the Russian front, what's going on in the European front. Everything had to be enclosed in that book of history. So, what is the Bible? And I want to say that the Bible is first and foremost a book of faith. It is a book that wants to relay moral messages of faith, belief in God. And in order to express these ideas, these views, real historical events are mentioned to strengthen a message. That's not a history book. And why am I mentioning all of this? We just in synagogues in Israel, we read the 5 books of Moses from beginning to end, and then repeat them. So every year we read the 5 books again and again, and we just moved from the book of Genesis to the book of Exodus. Now, as someone who has been reading the Bible for so many years, I don't find the move from Genesis to Exodus is something that bothers me. I'm used to it. Jacob and his family went into Egypt, and then at a certain point they multiplied. There was a Pharaoh that forgot Joseph, enslaved the Israelites, and then God redeemed the Israelites, and they went out of Egypt, etc. It's not something that bothers me, but as someone who's interested in history and in archaeology, when I look at that, that transfer from Genesis to Exodus, something bothers me suddenly. What bothers me? The fact that there are 430 years, according to the Bible, between the time that Jacob went into Egypt to the time that the Israelites were saved by Moses, 430 years, that we know nothing about. Can you imagine a book of history that talks about a historical period and skips 430 years? That's unbearable historically. And why does the Bible do that? Well, as I said, it does it because the main story of the 5 books is the Exodus. Everything is directed to the miracle of the 10 plagues. Everything is directed to the miracle of the sea, to the miracles of the desert. The 5 books are mentioned to bring that knowledge to people, to conserve that knowledge and pass it on. So, what happened in these 430 years? We really want to know. And that's actually is going to be the discussion that we're going to have now. Another thing that we need to keep in mind is during those 430 years, when we read the story, we read the focus, the spotlight is on Egypt. But what's going on around Egypt? What's going on in Canaan? Is there a total disconnect between the Israelites in Egypt and Canaan? Obviously, we know that Canaan is the promised land. That land was promised to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. The patriarchs purchased lands in Canaan. The tomb of the patriarch, the plot at Shechem. The Israelites conquered Shechem from the sons of Hamor. So there's definitely Israelite real estate in Canaan that needs to be tended to, and so the notion that there is a total disconnect between the Israelites in Egypt and Canaan is not logical. But it doesn't appear in Exodus or in Genesis. So we have to sometimes speculate, but sometimes read the Bible carefully and listen to weird stuff. that's going on. And that's what we're going to do.
Awesome. That's exciting.
So let's start with the presentation. Okay, so just to start out with the understanding that the one of the question marks that I spoke about, those weird things, is the covenants of Sinai, Moab, and Ebal, and this whole affair, I guess, started with my investigations of the Israelite footprint structures in the Jordan Valley and on Mount Ebal. I think that's a fascinating thing to see how archaeology suddenly pulls you out of your comfort zone and tries to teach you something, tries to give you a different angle of the biblical story. And I want our listeners to picture themselves sitting in the Jordan Valley in one of those footprint structures that Professor Adam Zertal described. And you have these huge amphitheaters overlooking the Jabbok Pass. Now, all the footprint structures that are located in different places all face the Jabbok Pass. And, visiting that place time and time again, I asked myself, what was so important about Jabbok? And, it dawned on me that when the Israelites sat on that natural amphitheater, looking at Jabbok, what they knew, what they saw, what was important for them was Jacob. It was the story of Jacob wrestling with the angel, Jacob's name changing from Jacob to Israel. It's the revelations that Jacob saw in that pass at Machanaim and Peniel. Now, for me, that's just a chapter in the book of Genesis. But when you suddenly understand that those stories were important stories for the Israelites, these are founding stories of the Israelite belief, the Israelite identity. The reason why I'm saying that is because when we read the Bible today as Bible believers, we tend to look at everything from the end. Of course, there are the Ten Commandments, there is Sinai and all these events, and then the Israelites are in the desert, and then they go into the land of Israel and the conquest, etc. We know the story. But when we go suddenly and say, wait a second, stop 1 second, let's go back in time to when the Israelites are in Egypt. What do they believe in? What is their identity? The identity of the Israelites in Egypt was not the same identity that the Israelites had when they were conquering Canaan or when they were crowning King Saul and King David. Every 50 years, 100 years, etc., there is I would say, an addition to the identity. Americans are not today what they were 200 years ago or 150 years ago. The American identity developed, and so did the Israelites. So what we're going to try to do now is to go back in time and try to understand what exactly happened in Egypt, what exactly happened in Sinai, and how that changed the Israelite identity. So let's first start with the promise that was made to Abraham. The Israelites go down to Egypt with a promise. And that promise is in Genesis 15, verse 12 to 14. God appears to Abraham in the covenant of the pieces. And he tells him in verse 13, then the Lord said to him, know for certain that for 400 years, your descendants will be strangers in a country not their own, and that they will be enslaved and mistreated there. But I will punish the nation they serve as slaves, and afterward they will come out with great possessions. In other words, we have a prophecy that's given to Abraham that his descendants are going to be enslaved in a foreign country, and then God is going to redeem them, and they will come out with great possessions. So, we're all reading this and we're saying, wow, well, here's the prophecy of the Egyptian bondage, the Egyptian slavery. But I want to say another thing, and that's true. I just want to say that when I'm looking at this prophecy, something is missing. Where is Sinai? Okay, all we have here is a national event of the descendants of Abraham that are going to be taken out of bondage, and they're going to come out with great possessions. But Sinai is not part of this plan. And so the Israelites are going into Egypt with this prophecy, knowing that one day a Redeemer will come and save them from Egypt. Now Jacob goes into the land of Egypt, and we have the famous story of Ephraim and Manasseh. And there is as an Israeli Jew, an Orthodox Jew, I bless my children every Friday with this blessing. Yesimcha Elohim ke'Ephraim u'ke'Menashe. May God make you like Ephraim and Manasseh. And I'm asking myself, what's so special about Ephraim and Manasseh? Why is the Bible saying that is the way that the Israelites will bless their children? That verse that Jacob said, that may God make you like Ephraim and Manasseh. What about the other, sons of Jacob? Why are these so important? And why is this blessing becoming a blessing that all Israelites will bless their children? And, it sounds like a story about a Jewish mother that tells her son, may you be like your uncle who is a doctor, or may you be like your cousin who is a lawyer. I mean, there's something special about Ephraim and Manasseh that becomes a model to all the Israelites. What is that model? What are they doing that makes them so precious and so important in the eyes of the Israelites? So we know the story about the bondage. We talked about the move from Genesis to Exodus, and now the length of time the Israelite people lived in Egypt was 430 years. At the end of the 430 years, to the very day, all the Lord's divisions left Egypt. So here we have the 430 years that we know nothing about. All we know is that there was a first period, there was a good time. We know that there was a favorable Egyptian rule during the time of Joseph. And by the way, that rule that I just mentioned is identified by many scholars as the rule of the Hyksos in Egypt. After the revolution against the Hyksos, we have a second period, and that is a bad time, a new king that doesn't like Canaanites, that doesn't like foreigners, that believes in native Egyptian rule. And then the Israelites are regarded as enemies of the state, just like the Hyksos. And we hear about the massacre of the children and slavery. That's all we know. But 430 years is a lot of time. There has to be more information. And as I mentioned earlier, what is the connection of the Israelites living in Egypt with Canaan? So if we don't have any information in Genesis and Exodus, we have to look somewhere else. And, a gap of 430 years is not something that we can ignore. We cannot ignore. As I mentioned, the Bible is not a history book, but it describes real historical events. So the question is, what happened? And what are the sources that we can learn from to know what happened during these 430 years? Obviously, the Bible and archaeology. So let's first talk about Ephraim. I would say the classic view of Bible readers is that all the tribes, the 12 tribes, were in Egypt. And the 12 tribes left Egypt together to Canaan. And that during those 430 years, there was no Israelite outside of Egypt. The Bible doesn't say that clearly, but the way we read the Bible for centuries and for millennia, we don't see anything relevant in the Bible, in Genesis or Exodus, about the existence of other tribes in the land of Canaan. So what we have to do is we have to turn to the book of history in the Bible. What is the book of history in the Bible? It's Chronicles. And Chronicles, is all the way in the back of the Bible. Many people skip it. They think it's not an important book, but I think it is. And what we're going to do now is we're going to read an interesting passage in the book of Chronicles that is going to shed some light on what happened during those 430 years. So in 1 Chronicles chapter 7, verse 20 to 24, we have a tree, a family tree of Ephraim. And Ephraim, we read a story that we've never heard before. Let's read it together. So we have the descendants of Ephraim, Shutelach, Bered, Tachat, El Edah, Zabad, and Shutelach. Okay, everything's good until now. And then we have an interesting story. Ezer and Elad were killed by the native-born men of Gath when they went down to seize their livestock. Okay, let's stop here for a second. The Chronicles is telling us that the descendants of Ephraim are killed by the people or the men of Gath when they went to seize their livestock. Gath is one of the Philistine cities in Canaan, not in Egypt. So, and bear in mind, Ephraim is not a child of Jacob. Ephraim is the grandchild of Jacob. So we're already talking about the time possibly when Jacob has already passed away. Joseph may be still alive. The descendants of Ephraim are walking in Canaan, and there is a quarrel with the people of God, the Philistines, and they get killed. Are these echoes of the Philistine invasion at the end of the late Bronze Age into the Mediterranean area? Maybe, I don't know. But what we see here is that there is a war between Israelites and between the people of God. Let's continue. Their father Ephraim mourned for them many days, and his relatives came to comfort him. Then he made love to his wife again, and she became pregnant and gave birth to a son. He named him Beriah, because there had been misfortune in his family. And then we see another interesting verse. His daughter was Sherah, who built lower and upper Bet Horon, as well as Uzen She'erah. Now, a Bible believer who's reading this verse, doesn't make a lot out of this verse. But for someone who lives in the land of Israel and who is somewhat familiar with the geography, this really stands out to be a very important verse because, first of all, it's a feminist verse. Okay, at the time when you would think women are not important, the daughter of Ephraim, Shera, is building two towns in Canaan, Lower and Upper Bet Horon, identified with two Arab villages today, Bet Ur el-Fuka and Bet Ur el-Tahta. These two villages are located in the tribal land of Ephraim. Okay, this is a big surprise because we hear nothing about it in Genesis. There's no information about Ephraimites or Israelites, fighting in Canaan, building towns in Canaan. This is new information. Again, the reason why it's not mentioned in Genesis is because it's not relevant to the story of the Exodus. But in the book of Chronicles, we see echoes. We see clear verses that mention that Ephraim's descendants are living in Canaan, herding their flocks in Canaan, and fighting in Canaan and building towns in Canaan. And this is really interesting. Another interesting thing that comes out of this passage is the mentioning of Joshua bin Nun. Again, Joshua bin Nun is the leader that replaces Moses and brings the Israelites into Canaan. We don't know anything about Joshua. We don't know where he comes up from. He suddenly appears at the foot of Mount Sinai, but where did he come from? Was he born in Egypt? I always thought he did. But when we read this passage, we see that the whole passage is happening in Canaan. And at the end of the lineage of Ephraim, we see Elishama his son, Nun his son, and Joshua his son. So there are some Bible scholars that believe that Joshua is actually born in Canaan, in the tribal land of Ephraim. And, hearing what was going on with Egypt and the Exodus, decides to leave his family and join the Israelites in the desert. And we see something interesting. When Joshua joins Moses and the Israelites, there's something weird that goes on there, and that is that Moses changes Joshua's name. Joshua's name, his original name, is Hosea. And what does Moses do? Moses adds the name of the Lord to Joshua's name, from Hoshea to Yehoshua, which brings, the name of, Jews cannot say the name of the Lord. So I'm trying to be careful with that. But the name of the Lord is applied to Joshua's name. What is the significance of that? And we'll talk about that later on. Another thing that's interesting is we see at the end that there is a summary of the lands and settlements that are included in the tribal land of Ephraim. And we see Shechem and its villages as part of Ephraim's land. Why is that important? Because the question is this verse describing the situation after Joshua's conquest? Or is this describing the situation during the time of the Egyptian exile? That's another question. Why am I asking that question? It would be easy. The easiest question, the easiest answer would be to say, yes, these are the towns of Ephraim after the conquest. The problem is that Shechem doesn't appear in the list of cities that Joshua conquered. Okay, this is a big problem because Shechem is not a peripheral city. Shechem is the most important city in Canaan, and Joshua doesn't conquer it. But here, Shechem appears as part of the land of Ephraim. We're going to talk about that as well. Let's move on. Here is the map of Ephraim, and we see the different cities that are included in that area, including Shechem, that I just mentioned, which is on the border between the tribal land of Ephraim and Manasseh. And Shiloh is also a city that Bible scholars believe was part of the Shechem system of cities. And Shiloh is also not mentioned as a city that was conquered by Joshua. So when did Shiloh become an Ephraimite city? That's another story that we're going to talk about. Here are pictures of the Arab villages of Bet Ur el-Fuka, Bet Ur el-Tahta, that are identified with Beit Horon, Upper Bet Horon and Lower Bet Horon, that She'erah, the daughter of Ephraim, established, built in Canaan, again, during the time that the Israelites, all the Israelites, are supposed to be in Egypt. Let's continue on. Let's talk a bit about the archaeology. And in the Manasseh Hill Country Survey that was conducted by Professor Adam Zertal and his crew, what they found was that during the late Bronze Age and the early Iron Age, the area that is populated by the Israelite culture is the tribal land of Manasseh and Ephraim. Okay? From that point on, the Israelites expanded on. And so the question I ask is, why are the Israelites that are coming from Egypt settling specifically in that area, in the area of Ephraim and Manasseh? And, we just read in the book of Chronicles. Why? Because that area was already part of the Israelite occupation, or the Israelite rule over the highlands of Israel. And so it was easy for the Israelites to go in there and live without fighting, because that was already part of the Israelite, I would say the nucleus of the Israelite kingdom, just before expanding on to other areas. In the Amarna letters that were found in the city of Achataten, that was founded by Pharaoh Amenhotep IV, we read letters that were written between the king of Jerusalem and King Achataton, or Amenhotep IV. And the king of Jerusalem is asking Pharaoh to send him military aid against the king of Shechem, that has aligned himself with the tribes of the Chabiru. Chabiru is also written as Apiru. And so some Bible scholars believe that what we're reading could be an early mention of the Ephraimite existence in the land of Israel, in the area of Shechem, specifically the area of Shechem that we just read about. Okay, this is, again, an interesting connection between the book of Chronicles, the story of the Ephraimites roaming the land of Shechem, and the king of Jerusalem, asking for help from Pharaoh against those Afiru or Hebrews that are trying to take land from the kingdom of Jerusalem. Let's talk about Manasseh. Can we find any information that could maybe tell us if Manasseh would possibly also be in the land of Israel? Remember, we had Ephraim and Manasseh being blessed by Jacob, and a very clear message sent to all the Israelites that they need to be like the doctors and the lawyers. They need to be like Ephraim and Manasseh. So what about Manasseh? Where is Manasseh? Is Manasseh in Egypt, or is Manasseh possibly not in Egypt? So let's go back to Chronicles, and we read in the book of Chronicles a couple of interesting verses. First of all, we read that Asriel, a descendant of Manasseh, is married to an Aramean concubine. Okay, we have to remember Manasseh and Ephraim are Egyptian royalty. They are the children of Joseph, who is an Egyptian prince. Their mother is Osnat, daughter of Potipharah, the priest of On. So they have, very important Egyptian lineage in their blood. And so an Aramean concubine, I would say, is not a simple concubine, but maybe a political marriage that was arranged for Manasseh, for Asriel, the son of Manasseh. We hear that the result of that marriage between Asriel and the Aramean concubine is the son of the descendant called Makir. Makir, and we're talking here about the grandchild of Manasseh. The grandchild of Manasseh is also known as the father of Gilead. Okay, now this is surprising. Why? Because we know that the Israelites conquered the Gilead and the Golan Heights when they came out of Egypt. In the book of Numbers and Deuteronomy, we know that they came in, and just before crossing to Jericho, they conquered Gilead and the Golan Heights. So this is a later story. But here we read that Machir, the grandson of Manasseh, is already known to be the father of Gilead. And Bible scholars and Bible commentators clearly say that the father of Gilead means the founder of the towns of Gilead. So what we have here is another historical event or historical fact that is mentioned without any more information, historical information, that there is presence of Manassites in the eastern bank of the Jordan River, in the mountains of Gilead, and possibly in other areas as well. And we're going to talk about that. Another thing that we see in this passage in Chronicles 1 concerning Manasseh is that that Machir gives his son the name Gilead. We also see that the name Shechem also appears in one of the names of the descendants of Manasseh. Now, bear in mind that this is before, hundreds of years before the division in Shiloh between the tribes. As we all know, in Shiloh, the land of Israel was divided amongst the tribes. But here we see that the tribe of Manasseh already had some knowledge as to the names of the cities that are going to be part of their allotment. So this is also an interesting fact. Now, let's look at the maps here for a second. We see that Manasseh, the tribe of Manasseh, is the only one that received two portions, one on the eastern bank of the Jordan River and one on the western bank of the Jordan River.
It's always been a little bit of a mystery to me.
Exactly, and we're going to solve the mystery. Why is Manasseh given the area on the east of the Jordan River? Well, Bible readers will immediately jump and say, well, they asked for it. We all know the story about the tribes asking Moses to stay behind and not cross the Jordan River because the area was fertile and they had a lot of herds that they wanted to feed. And we read that Moses was angry at them, and they promised Moses that they are going to be the first ones to go into Canaan and conquer Canaan. And then only after Canaan is conquered will they go back to their areas in the eastern bank of the Jordan River. And then Moses gives them those areas. But when we read those passages carefully, we see something weird. What is the weird thing? The tribes that are asking Moses to stay behind on the eastern bank of the Jordan River are Reuben and Gad. And Moses is angry at Reuben and Gad. He blames them as sinners, that they are sinning just like the 12 spies that have said bad things about the land of Israel, as we recall. And then Gad and Reuben answered Moses and tell him that they will be the first ones going into the land of Israel. And Moses is contented, is happy with the solution. And then he gives Reuben, Gad, and the half tribe of Manasseh their lands on the eastern bank of the Jordan River. So we have a problem. We have a historical black hole, as I like to call it. Why? Because why did Moses give the tribe of Manasseh that area in the Gilead Mountains and the Golan Heights without them asking for it? They didn't ask for it, but Moses gave it to them. Let's make the situation a bit more complicated. The Israelites are coming into the land of the eastern bank of the Jordan River, and God is telling them not to conquer Edom. And then they continue on until they reach the area, the plains of Moab, which are, in this area right here. And we read that Sichon, the king of Heshbon, who conquered that area, goes out to fight against the Israelites. And they win. They are able to conquer the kingdom of Sichon, the Amorite. And, the next step would be to cross the Jordan River and conquer Jericho. What do the Israelites do? Do they do that? They don't. Instead of going westward and crossing the Jordan River, they go northward. And we read that Og, the king of Bashan, of the Golan Heights, comes down south to fight the tribes of Israel. And he loses, and the Israelites liberate the Gilead Mountains and the Golan Heights from the kingdom of Og. Why on earth did the Israelites decide to go up north on a military campaign to liberate those areas without any provocation from Og. What was their motivation to go up north and conquer these areas? Okay, that's another interesting question that needs to be answered. The Bible doesn't say anything. It just says that the Israelites went up north and fought against Og. Another mystery, here we see the riddles of Manasseh. So we just mentioned the reason, the fact that the Israelites didn't cross the Jordan River. They went up north. That they didn't ask Moses for that allotment in the eastern bank of the Jordan River. And then we hear about another riddle. What's going on exactly on the censuses of Moab and Sinai? The Israelites are counted twice in the desert, once in Sinai, and once in the plains of Moab. And the numbers of the tribes are similar on both censuses, the Sinai census and the Moab census. There are only two tribes that experience a major change in their numbers. One is the tribe of Simeon. And Bible scholars believe that the decrease in the numbers of Simeon are a result of the sin of Baal Peor that was sinned by Zimri ben Salu, the president or the leader of the tribe of Simeon. The second tribe that experiences a large increase is the tribe of Manasseh. The tribe of Manasseh is joined by 20,000 men from nowhere. Okay, and this stands out compared to the other tribes that don't experience any change in their numbers. Where did these 20,000 come from? Another thing that's interesting is the story in the book of Judges about the civil war between the judge Jephthah and the tribe of Ephraim. We read that there is a civil war and that Jephthah from the Gileads, from the Manasseh area on the eastern bank of the Jordan River, is chasing the Ephraimites, and he does a linguistic test to check who belongs to the people of Gilead and who doesn't. And the interesting thing is that the word that is used, the guards of Jephthah are asking the people that are trying to cross into Canaan to say the word shibolet. And instead of saying shibolet, they say sibolet, or the other way around. What exactly is going on here? We understand that the people of Gilead have a different dialect. They speak Hebrew differently. Now, the weird thing is that, shin, the sound sh in Hebrew, and sin are both pronounced very easily in Hebrew. There's no reason why the people of Ephraim wouldn't be able to pronounce both words. And so Bible scholars believe that what the Bible is describing is actually not the difference between sh and s, but rather the difference between sh and th. When you ask an Israeli to say the word think, I think, Israelis won't say I think, they would say I think, okay? Because in Hebrew, you don't have the sound th. It does, however, appear in Arabic and in other Semitic languages in the area. And so the belief is that the people of Gilead spoke a dialect of Hebrew that was an ancient dialect, or a Proto-Canaanite dialect, that was different from the dialect that was spoken in Canaan by the, let's call them the Egyptian Israelites. There is no reason why there would be such a difference in dialect in such a small area. And so, we see all these riddles, and the question is, what's going on exactly in the area of the Gilead and the Golan Heights? And what I want to suggest, and this is not my idea, this is something that Bible scholars, Jewish Bible scholars in Israel have been speaking about for, I believe, since the 1970s, is the possibility that Manasseh, like Ephraim, and had, during those 430 years that we discussed, had, let's call them Israelite colonies in the area of the Gilead and the Golan Heights. The Machir, the father of Gilead, the descendant of Manasseh, was I would say the person who founded those cities and towns in the Gilead Mountains. And I just want to stop here for a second and mention that the Gilead Mountains are also important because, as you recall, Jacob made an agreement with Lavan, his uncle. They erected a memorial that said, from here on is my area, and from here on is your area. We will not, our descendants will not cross this line to fight against each other. So part of the Gilead Mountains, after that pact between Lavan and Jacob, were also considered to be part of Jacob's area, of Jacob's land. And so what we're suggesting is that Manasseh, during the exile in Egypt, ruled over parts of the Gilead and the Golan Heights. And what happened was that when the Israelites came out of Egypt and came to the area of Canaan, that area was under the occupation of the Amorites and Og, king of Bashan. What the Israelites did by fighting both Sichon, but mainly Og, king of Bashan, is to liberate the areas that were already considered by the Israelites part of the Israelite kingdom or inheritance. That is why when Moses gives the areas to the east of the Jordan River, he's giving it to Gad and Reuben, who asked for it, but he also gives it to the half tribe of Manasseh, which didn't ask for it because it already belonged to it, already belonged to Manasseh. Those 20,000 that join the tribe of Manasseh, the plains of Moab, who are they? Well, now we have an answer. These are the remnants of the Manassite colonies in the Golan Heights and the Gilead Mountains, joining their brothers and sisters that just came from Egypt. Why do we have a different dialect? Because for 430 years, you had a population of Israelites in the Gileads that developed, or rather spoke the native tongue of Hebrew that was there in the Gilead Mountains. And when their, I would say, Israelite Egyptians developed a dialect that excluded the sound th. So this is fascinating. Now we understand. We're starting to understand why Jacob is blessing specifically Ephraim and Manasseh, because the message that Jacob is trying to bring is to the rest of the Israelites: don't be too comfortable in Egypt. Okay, you need to be like Manasseh and Ephraim that are going out there to conquer the land of Israel and to populate it and to build towns, and to live in the Gilead Mountains. This is the message that's hidden behind that blessing of Ephraim and Manasseh. Another thing that came out during one of my Bible readings is an interesting verse in Micah. Micah 7 is asking God to lead the Israelites as days before, as in the past. And when did God lead the Israelites? When he took them out of Egypt. But when we read the verse in Micah 7, we see something an additional historical time. Okay, let's read this. Shepherd your people with your staff, the flock of your inheritance, which lives by itself in the forest and fertile pasture lands. Let them feed in Bashan and Gilead, as in days long ago. What's going on here? And after that, chronologically, as in the days when you came out of Egypt, I will show them my wonders. And so Micah is echoing that ancient time that he's talking about, that time that preceded the Exodus, that preceded the 10 plagues. We're talking about a time long ago that specifically mentions Bashan and Gilead, which are again the exact places that we just spoke about where Manasseh stayed, where Manasseh lived during those 430 years. So let's summarize. During the 430 years, we see Israelite presence in Canaan, led by two tribes, Ephraim and Manasseh, in two areas, Samaria and Gilead and Bashan. So now that we've established that there is an Israelite population, let's try to understand who they are, what they believe in. What is their worldview? So who are these Israelites who are not in Egypt? Okay, we can describe the process of the theological process, the ethnic process that the Israelites going out of Egypt went through. How can we learn it or describe it? Very clearly, it's mentioned clearly in the books of the Pentateuch. Okay, it's written there. That's the main story. That's where the spotlight is. But what about these Ephraimites living in Samaria and about these Manassites living in the Gilead and Bashan? Let's try to dive into the Bible and try to unglue all the pieces and try to concentrate on those Israelites. So let's call the theology the pre-Sinaitic theology. Okay. Again, reading today, we read about the Sinai revelation. We think that is the main story, and it is. But if the Israelites are leaving Egypt after the 10 plagues and after the ripping of the Red Sea, where are these Manassites and Ephraimites? They're not there. They haven't experienced Egypt. They haven't experienced the bondage. They haven't experienced Mount Sinai or the 10 plagues or the parting of the Red Sea. So what do they believe in? So first of all, a certain type of monotheism that comes from the belief of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Their theology is made up of the stories of the patriarchs that we know from the book of Genesis. Their holy sites are the sites that the patriarchs walked in, sacrificed in, buried themselves in. where they had revelations. So Beersheba, Hebron, Rachel's tomb, Bethel, Shechem, Jabbok, Machanaim, Peniel, all these places are holy sites for these ancient Israelites. Circumcision obviously is part of the theology, the ethnic identity, because it's a commandment that was given to Abraham, a patriarch. The tendon that was hurt by the angel when Jacob fought against the angel at Jabbok, and then it says the Israelites do not eat the tendon attached to the socket of the hip. So this is another tradition that is kept by these ancient Israelites. Levirate marriage is also something that is done by these ancient Israelites, and we see that with the story of Judah, that has a son that needs to marry Tamar, and he sins, and then there's the whole issue of levirate marriage is very important for those ancient Israelites. And last but not least is the idea that unlike the Egyptian Israelites, who are sheep herders, who are always described as people that tend to flocks, we can assume that the Israelites in the Gileads and the Golan Heights and the area of Samaria are more agriculturally oriented. And this brings up that mysterious feast of the Lord in Shiloh in the book of Judges, where you have girls dancing in the vineyards. According to the Jewish tradition, this is the 15th day of the month of Av. This is the feast of the grapes, and it's a feast that is not commanded in Sinai. This is an Ephraimite feast. This is a feast that belongs to the ancient days, to the days of Ephraim in the land of Israel prior to the Exodus. And this is another topic, the Ephraimite calendar, the Ephraimite traditions, that it's a whole different topic. It's a whole different series of lectures that we're going to have soon, and I'm going to publish it. But the idea is that specifically this Feast of the Lord is a tradition of Ephraim. It's a tradition of the northern kingdom that was incorporated in our Bible and became part of the Israelite tradition. But it's not from Sinai. And this is important because, again, we think that Sinai is an integral part of the story. And we saw in the promise to Abraham and the prophecy of the covenant of the parts that Mount Sinai was not promised to Abraham. What was promised was the bondage in Egypt and the possessions coming out of Egypt. So how can we incorporate Sinai, and why do we need three covenants? Why do we need the covenant of Sinai, the covenant of Moab, and the covenant of Ebal? And I believe that now that we've established the base for the presence of Ephraim and Manasseh in the land of Canaan, now we can understand why there is a need for three covenants. So, first of all, where do these three covenants appear? In Exodus 19, in Deuteronomy 29, and in Deuteronomy 11, 27, and Joshua 8. What we have is national events in three different geographical locations, three different historical locations, where the Lord is brought in, where the name of Hashem, of God, is brought into the picture, where the idea of the laws is introduced to the Israelites. Again, all these laws that we read in Sinai and later on are not part of the ancient Israelite religion or theology. This is new stuff. When the Israelites are coming out of Egypt, they're not waiting to receive commandments. They're not waiting to receive a revelation of God on Mount Sinai. The next step out of going out of Egypt is to go into Canaan. That's the promise. So suddenly, these Israelites are coming to Mount Sinai, and Moses says, okay, now I'm going to bring you laws and decrees. And the Israelites are saying, this is not part of the promise. We weren't supposed to get that. That's not something that Abraham was promised. And it's interesting to see this thing appearing also in the verses. Where do we see the Israelites saying, the laws and decrees are not part of the plan? And that's question number one. Question number two, we see in the revelation to Moses in Exodus 6 that God says to Moses, let's read this. God also said to Moses, I am the Lord. Okay, Lord is the name of God, YHVH. I appeared to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob as God Almighty, El Shaddai. That was my name when I appeared to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. But by my name, the Lord, I did not make myself known to them. In other words, what God is saying is that until Horeb, until Mount Sinai, God was known as El Shaddai. The revelation of Sinai suddenly brings a new name in, and this name has to be acknowledged by the Israelites, who don't know God by that name. So, in other words, there needs to be a covenant. There needs to be a revelation that brings Sinai with all its might, the Sinaitic theology, to the Israelites that are coming out of Egypt. Let's read this. I believe that this is one of the fascinating verses in the Bible. We read that, the Israelites are saying to Moses, whatever God, we will do whatever God said. Okay, this is beautiful. The Israelites are so, they're full of faith in God. But I want to suggest a different reading of this verse. Moses went back to some of the elders of the people and said before them all the words the Lord had commanded him to speak. Okay, Moses is saying, the Lord, YHVH, he wants to command you to do commandments, to do decrees. And what is the response? The response is, we will do everything the Lord had said. Okay, so Moses, don't invent these new laws and decrees. We already know what God told us. He gave the patriarchs commandments. He gave them a belief. Don't add anything that's not needed. So Moses brought their answer back to the Lord. And what is the answer of the Lord? The Lord said to Moses, I'm going to come to you in a dense cloud so that the people will hear me speaking with you and will always put their trust in you. Okay? So we understand that until that time, the people didn't trust Moses. They didn't agree with the request of Moses to fulfill the commandments, to believe in a God that is called YHVH. Okay? So we see this friction going on because the Sinaitic revelation is news. It's a new theology that the Israelites didn't know. Now, who's coming out of Egypt? We have the sons of Israel, the ethnic Israelites, and we have the Erev Rav, which is a mixture of multitudes, peoples that were in Egypt that were impressed by the miracles of God. These two groups have to be put under the covenant of Sinai. So there needs to be a covenant, a new covenant that brings these two groups under the belief in the Lord, under the belief in the commandments. And after Sinai, they are one theological group. What about the other groups? What about the other covenants? The plains of Moab, we have the Israelites coming in, and they're joined with their Manasseh brothers and sisters that were living in the Gileads and the Golan Heights. They did not experience Sinai. They didn't come under the covenant of Sinai. So there is a need for a second covenant, a covenant that would bring the Manassites under the Sinaitic covenant. Okay? So why do we need a third covenant? Well, we all know the answer now. Ebal is the final covenant. It's the covenant that brings Ephraim, that's living in Samaria, that wasn't present in Sinai, under the Sinaitic covenant. And it's also the final covenant that brings all the groups together: the Israelite Egyptians, the Israelites Manassites, the Israelite Ephraimites, and also the foreigners that are living in Canaan that are part of the covenant with the house of Jacob. All these groups together have to come under one theological understanding of Sinai. So now we understand why there is a need for those three covenants.
And the Bible, I just noticed it there, and the Bible does make reference to native born.
Right.
Which maybe we're getting there.
Right. So, now we know who the native borns are. We understand that Ephraim is already in the land, and they are born of the land. And now we also understand why the name of Joshua was changed from Hosea to Yehoshua, because Moses wanted Joshua to carry the name of YHVH, of the Lord, in his name. He wanted Joshua to lead the Sinaitic theology into the land of Israel. His name is a flag of Sinai, in other words. He's not just an Ephraimite who knows the land, who was raised in the land, who knows its mountains and hills. It's the people that are the Canaanites that live there, their cities, their fortifications. He's also bringing a clear message that Manasseh and Ephraim have to be part of the Sinaitic covenant. And I believe that this is amazing. So let's summarize. The ceremony of blessings and curses is the most important event in the Bible. It unifies all the different elements of the nation of Israel, and it brings all the different groups under the Sinaitic covenant of the Lord. Thank you.
Wow, that's incredible. Goodness.
And you can see behind me Joshua's altar, the place where that final event occurred.
I need to visit that altar site next time I get over there. I've been in Shechem several times and been down to Tel Balata, whatever, but to I'm a huge, like, for me, like a lot of the sites that you're mentioning, the patriarchal sites, have been to all those sites, even over in Jordan, whatever, seen all that stuff. So it's just, to me, like, as I was listening to you, it's like connecting all these dots of places that I've been to, and makes it real in my mind. But it's incredible. Now, I mean, so in the Jewish world, this conversation has been going on, you said, kind of since the 70s, that people have been talking about this. In the Christian world, we really don't know. I mean, maybe there's scholars that do, but the conversations aren't there that I know of for people talking about this sort of thing. So that's why it was like a little bit of a surprise to me. I mean, I picked up on, I think one of the more important verses that you had brought out, I think was in the book of Joshua, where it talks about the native born. Um, like that hit me like a ton of rocks. Like it was like native born. Oh, there were native born there. Like it says it. It's one thing to have the theory and you can put some of the pieces there, but then you actually have a reference in scripture that says native born. So there were native born people that were covenanted as well. So unbelievable, absolutely amazing. So awesome. Well, thank you so much for that. Appreciate it. I know people are going to love that. So uh, awesome time. Appreciate it.
Wonderful. And I think that, just to finish off by saying that when we look at the Bible is actually a library of books that are written in different times and in different places, geographical places, by different prophets. And, after you understand that there is an Israelite identity in the land of Canaan, that also explains a lot in terms of the parting of Judah and the 10 tribes.
Sure. Yeah.
It also explains a lot about the tendency to worship idols more in the 10 tribes of the north than in Judah.
Mm-hmm.
But what I wanted to mention specifically is that the Bible that we have today is actually a synthesis of the tradition of the Egyptian Israelites and the tradition of Ephraim. And we need to understand that, because when we read the Bible now, we understand that sometimes in one chapter you have verses of, I would say, Judah or the Egyptian Israelites, but also verses and stories and traditions from the Northern Kingdom. And they're both incorporated in our Bible today. And, one of my missions is trying to investigate the Bible and try to understand where that thin line is between those two traditions. And that might be another topic to discuss.
Maybe it sounds amazing. Well, thank you so much. Again, people can find you online. What is the website? Avi Lipkin Tours?
No. Avi Lipkin is my father.
Oh, Avi, I'm so sorry. Forgive me.
By the way, my father, Avi Lipkin, is right now meeting Benjamin Netanyahu, believe it or not.
Really?
Anyway, yeah.
Awesome.
Well, my Bible teachings can be found at hiddenisrael.net. I have a couple of Bible teachings on important biblical sites in Samaria, Bethel, Gilgal, Shiloh, and Joshua's altar. We're just about to produce another video about the Battle of Michmas and the son of King Saul. So that's going to be fascinating. You can befriend me on Facebook. I have a lot of interesting posts about archaeology, amazing drone footage from my drones that I use in archaeological sites. And also you can join my YouTube channel, subscribe to it, and you will see some interesting information about the Bible and archaeology. And of course, my travel agency, Lipkin Tours, which organizes tours to Israel and specifically to the biblical heartland of Israel, Judea, and Samaria. Obviously now is a bit problematic worldwide to travel, but the moment things open up, you are all invited to come and enjoy the land of the Bible.
Awesome. Again, thank you so much.
Thank you.